This isn't the story of a warm family reunion. Oh no. This is the story of a son testing the limits of royal blood, and a father who answered not with love, but with icy authority. What happens when a runaway prince dares to march his children back into the palace that once slammed its doors in his face? Not just any palace, but Buckingham Palace. The beating heart of the monarchy. The fortress of crowns, secrets, and unshakable tradition. Because when Prince Harry came knocking, he wasn't met with open arms. He was met with something far more brutal: humiliation on a global stage, a clash of power, and a king who made it clear that even his own son could not rewrite the rules of the crown. Let's set the stage. For years now, tension has been bubbling beneath the polished floors of Buckingham Palace. King Charles, monarch of a 1,000-year-old dynasty, head of an empire built on bloodlines and tradition, has barely laid eyes on his own grandchildren. Insiders whisper he's only met Lilibet once. Just once. And Archie? Practically a stranger. Pause for a second and think about that. The King of England, surrounded by gilded portraits of heirs and dynasties, the walls themselves echoing with family legacy. And yet, when it comes to his own grandchildren, the direct line of succession that flows from his throne, there's nothing. Silence. A void. Every time the subject comes up, royal commentators lower their voices. Palace insiders shift uncomfortably. Even staff behind the scenes admit it. There's sadness in the air. A grandfather cut off. A family divided. But here's where it gets darker. Because sadness only tells half the story. Behind closed doors, suspicion has taken root. What looks to the public like a tragic rift begins to feel, inside the palace, like something far more dangerous. So when Prince Harry suddenly announced he wanted to bring Archie and Lilibet into Buckingham Palace, not to a private garden, not to Windsor for tea, not even to Sandringham for a quiet moment, but right into the most powerful fortress of monarchy itself, people didn't see a tender reunion. They saw a stunt, a statement, a calculated move with royal consequences. Picture it. The whispers didn't just spread, they ignited like wildfire. Harry was flying back to the UK. Within hours, Buckingham Palace wasn't just busy, it was in near lockdown. Phones buzzing non-stop, senior aides pacing marble corridors, security teams quietly upping their presence around every gate and hallway. This wasn't the kind of casual pop-in visit where a prodigal son drops by for tea and biscuits. No, this felt like a coordinated operation. Harry wasn't arriving hat in hand. He was preparing to storm the gates. And the most shocking part? He wasn't coming alone. The word on the street, and whispered with both hope and dread, was that he was bringing the children. To the public, that sounded heartwarming, almost cinematic. Finally, the grandchildren are visiting their grandfather. A healing family moment. It played like a Disney movie in the headlines, a story of reconciliation everyone could cheer for. But inside the palace walls, the mood was entirely different. To them, this wasn't a family reunion. This was an ambush. And here's why. Those children are shrouded in secrecy. No steady stream of official portraits. No waving from palace balconies. Barely a handful of carefully staged photographs over the years. And every absence, every blurry photo, every rumor has only stoked more speculation about what Harry and Meghan are hiding. So, imagine the impact of suddenly parading those children into the most sacred rooms of royal power. Not just to wave hello, not just for a polite afternoon tea, but to plant them firmly in the royal setting, as if nothing had happened, as if years of conflict and betrayal could be erased with a single photo op. That wasn't bold. That was defiance. A declaration of war against protocol, against control, against the very machinery of the monarchy itself. In Harry's mind, maybe the logic was painfully simple. These are my children. They are the king's grandchildren. Of course, they should be welcomed inside Buckingham Palace. To him, it wasn't a matter of protocol. It was a matter of blood, of family. But Charles wasn't looking at the situation through the eyes of a father. He was wearing the crown, and through that lens, sentimentality doesn't count for much. He was thinking as a monarch. And monarchs don't operate in the world of feelings, they operate in the world of power. To Charles, Buckingham Palace isn't a cozy family home filled with laughter and bedtime stories. It's a fortress, an institution, a living symbol of the monarchy itself, built on rules, hierarchy, and centuries of ironclad tradition. Every entry, every guest, every gesture inside those walls carries political weight. So when the request crossed his desk, Charles's response wasn't slow or hesitant or softened by grandfatherly warmth. It was immediate. And it was ice cold. A flat-out no. No compromise. No wiggle room. No gentle phrasing like, perhaps another time. What Harry heard instead was the sharp, echoing clang of royal authority, the sound of a door slamming shut. Because to Charles, this wasn't about children or playtime or reconciliation. This was about sovereignty, about who controls access to the monarchy's heart, about drawing a line in the sand so deep that even his own son couldn't step across it. And in that moment, Charles was crystal clear. He wasn't about to bend centuries of protocol for the son who had abandoned the system. Not for Harry, not for Meghan, not for anyone. For Harry, the rejection wasn't just painful. It wasn't just another family argument. It was something far worse, public humiliation. A humiliation broadcast on the global stage, where every royal decision is magnified, dissected, and replayed across headlines and social media feeds. And here's where the hypocrisy cuts like a knife. Ever since 2020, Harry has been obsessed with security. He's dragged the UK's Home Office through the courts, claiming Britain is unsafe for him, Meghan, and their children. Yet now, he wants those same children paraded through the most secure, most photographed fortress in the country.
He definitely doesn't see his relationship with his son as should be standing in the way of his grandchildren. Hopefully, that's something that can be repaired, even if his relationship isn't on the mend with his son.
The contradiction wasn't lost on palace staff. One aide muttered, "He's not asking for security. He's demanding it without paying the bill." And lurking in the background was another fear: cameras. Insiders still remember the Platinum Jubilee when Harry and Meghan tried to sneak a photographer into Windsor Castle. The late Queen herself put her foot down. Absolutely not. So when Harry requested palace access, Charles's refusal wasn't just about protocol. It was about trust. Could the monarchy really risk those children being photographed inside Buckingham Palace, only to end up in a Netflix documentary? Not a chance. Let's not sugarcoat it. This wasn't some quiet family squabble kept behind palace walls. Charles's rejection didn't stay private for long. It leaked. And once it leaked, it spread like wildfire. Within hours, the whispers became headlines. Fleet Street ran it first, then international outlets piled on. Bold, merciless banners stretched across the front pages. King says no to Harry. Royal door slammed shut. Charles blocks his own son. The image was clear: Harry pleading for entry, and Charles denying him with the weight of 1,000 years of monarchy behind him. For Harry, a man who once roamed Buckingham Palace as his playground, the sting was excruciating. Once the Golden Prince, he now looked like an outcast, reduced to a supplicant, standing outside the gates that had always been his by birthright, only to have the drawbridge pulled up in his face. The symbolism was brutal, and the world noticed. And then came the silence. Not from Charles, his no was deafening enough. Not from a press, they were feasting on the drama. But from Meghan, no carefully crafted statement. No anonymous, friends close to the Duchess, feeding the tabloids. No sly whispers to sympathetic journalists. Nothing, just silence. But with Meghan Markle, silence is never just silence. It's a move on the chessboard, a strategy. Which raises the question, what was the strategy here? Was she playing the long game, keeping her hands clean, avoiding another round of dueling with the palace narratives? Or was her silence something colder, allowing Harry to take the blow alone, letting him wear the humiliation while she stayed above the fray? Some even wondered if it was payback. Payback for years of tension behind closed doors. Harry was not always backing her as fiercely as she demanded. For every time he hesitated or faltered or put the crown before her. Whatever the reason, the optics were merciless. Harry, isolated and visibly wounded. Meghan, calculating, holding her silence like a weapon. And Charles? Standing tall, not as a father, but as a monarch, unyielding, immovable, the man who refused to bend, even for his own flesh and blood. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a tableau, a public portrait of a fractured family, painted for the world to see. And in that picture, Harry looked very small indeed. Here's where things take an even darker turn. Insiders whisper this wasn't about hugs at all. It was about custody. Think about it. If Harry could establish the UK as a legitimate base for Archie and Lilibet, photographed inside Buckingham Palace with the king himself, he could argue Britain wasn't hostile. In any future custody battle, that evidence could flip the balance in his favor. And Meghan? There's no way she'd allow that. She spent years shielding the children from royal entanglements, carefully curating their appearances, refusing to let the monarchy lay claim. If Harry thought he could sneak them into Buckingham Palace as leverage, it may have been the most dangerous gamble of his life. Because one wrong move, and this isn't just gossip, it's the ugliest custody war in modern history, California versus the Crown. And lurking beneath it all, beneath the headlines, the palace whispers, the icy rejection, was a ghost the royals have never been able to bury, the secrecy surrounding Archie and Lilibet's births. From the very first moment, the questions were there. Why no smiling parents on the hospital steps, like generations before them? Why no traditional announcements pinned proudly to Buckingham Palace gates? Instead, there was an iron curtain of silence. Then came the photo ops, carefully staged, tightly controlled, and oddly artificial. Whispers turned to theories, surrogacy rumors, speculation about hidden timelines, questions about whether the public was being told the full story. Harry and Meghan, of course, dismissed it all as toxic gossip, a cruel smear campaign. But here's the thing. By dodging, deflecting, and refusing to follow traditions that had stood for decades, they didn't kill the whispers. They fed them. And so, when Harry suddenly demanded that Archie and Lilibet be ushered straight into the heart of Buckingham Palace, royal watchers saw more than a father wanting his children to see their grandfather. They saw a test, a collision between mystery and monarchy. Because the monarchy doesn't just run on crowns, jewels, and ceremonies, it runs on legitimacy. Lineage. Every birth, every heir, every detail must be crystal clear, documented, and beyond question. That is the foundation on which royal authority rests. And Charles? Perhaps deep down, his refusal wasn't about simple protocol or cold-hearted stubbornness. Perhaps it was about something far more chilling, the Crown's unwillingness to validate children whose origins remain clouded in secrecy. In that light, Charles's no wasn't just a rejection. It was a safeguard, a line drawn in the sand, protecting not just the monarchy's traditions, but its very survival. And so, Harry's grand plan backfired spectacularly. What he imagined as a warm reunion became a brutal reminder of where he truly stands, outside the palace gates, humiliated and stripped of power. For Meghan, the silence may have been strategic, but for Harry, it left him exposed, abandoned in the very country he once called home. And for Charles, the message was unmistakable. The monarchy bows to no one, not even a runaway prince with a global platform. Harry once called Buckingham Palace home. Now, it's the fortress that shut him out. So, was this really about children meeting their grandfather? Or was it about power, leverage, and desperation? Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. This chapter marks one of the most humiliating moments of Prince Harry's life, and a warning that the crown will always protect itself, even at the cost of family. Because in the House of Windsor, blood may run deep, but power runs deeper.